We are live. Hey, how's
Good.
it going, everybody? Welcome
Hello.
to welcome to Real Raw Health with Nicki, Burnett, and Matt Rowe. We're so excited to have you here. This is going to be a great show today, as we are talking about a really. Would you say that the topic is controversial, Nicki?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would say in some worlds it's controversial. I would say in our world it's not.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
there's fact in our world.
Yeah, in our world, it's kind of logic at some point. But
Yeah.
yes, I mean, but look at how much we're infiltrated in society today by just big food companies, the way that big ag pushes on things, and we get told that certain carbohydrates are fine and they're good to
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. And so just real quick, just for those who are on your stream who haven't met me yet, I'm Nicki Burnett. I'm Taste Life Nutrition, functional nutritionist, and I work with dogs. I help people feed their dogs real food instead of kibble. And
Hmm.
so with the dog foods that are out there, there you can look at them and okay, I'm going to start here. What gets me is the big food companies saying, hey, we have your back. We have you covered. We have this amazing nutrient dense food that has the highest amount of carbohydrates, which
Hmm.
are not meant for dogs. Dogs aren't meant to eat high carbohydrate or even moderate
Oh,
carbohydrate.
right.
But we are taking care of your dog.
Hmm.
And people are like, okay, great. Yay. I don't have to think about it. Let's take a scoop out of the bag and we'll put it in there and Rover's fine. And what
Right.
happens? Rover leaves us 10 years, 20 years too early.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then we go, why?
Right. And so it doesn't stop the fact that 50% of dogs over the age of 10 are dying of cancer.
Yeah.
And when I talked to Dr. Judy Jasek, the cancer vet, she's saying 2/3 get diagnosed with cancer and we treat them,
Mm-hmm.
but they're still like that shortened life is they're
Mm-hmm.
only making it to 13, maybe
Yeah.
14 years of age, when a
Yeah.
dog should live to be 20 years of age. And there are
Really?
reports of 30-year-old dogs,
Yeah.
like the one in Australia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I was, we're talking about carbohydrates, but I can't help but to throw this in there, just, in talking about the cancer
Mhm.
is just all of the other stuff that is put into this food as well. And you and I have
Mm.
said this multiple times, whether it's on this platform or any other platform,
Just when we
thinking,
talk to each other, just
yeah,
every once in a while, yeah,
yeah,
it comes
right.
up. Yeah.
But the things that they put in that food,
Mhm.
besides just the carbohydrates, which again, I'm going to repeat, dogs don't need potatoes, they don't need grains, they don't need
Mhm.
gluten, they don't need all of these barley. They make it sound pretty and nice, but it's not
Mhm.
okay.
Right.
But on top of that, I was talking today on the radio show about toxins and
Mm.
pesticides and the herbicides and the preservatives and these things that they put into our colorings into the food that are so incredibly toxic. And one of the points that I made was the coloring. We know that kids are affected. This ADD, ADHD. With food colorings, and we don't understand why they're dealing with this, but they're eating
Right.
sugar and colorings and all this processed food. How do we know that that's not what's going on with some of our dogs who are this uncontrollable, sort of schizoid dog, but eating this trash food
Mhm.
that's full of stuff it's literally affecting their brain. It's a neurotoxin
Mhm.
affecting their brain. And
Right.
this is what, aside from carbohydrates, this is what is put into their food, into our food. We should be pissed.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm pissed.
Yeah. Well, when you read on the label and it says natural flavoring, seems
Oh,
healthy, it can be one of 108 different chemicals that have been outlawed in Europe
yeah,
because they've seen it lead to cancer. I
yeah.
mean, look at yellow number 5, red 8. Look at how much that is in pet food. So if they're doing this to humans, imagine what they're doing to your dog.
I want to read something if I can
Mhm.
find it real quick. And I
So
read this.
yeah,
Go ahead.
no, no,
I,
no, you go.
I read this on the show this morning, and this is from PubMed. And I
Okay.
just dawned on me that this would be an interesting thing because again, it goes with human. It's about human nutrition, but it goes along with animal nutrition as well,
Hmm.
and the stuff that we're
Right.
feeding. So it was a study, and it was done in PubMed. And so their conclusion was this: The inadequacy of much of the testing and the evidence for carcinogenicity, genotoxicity, and hypersensitivity, coupled with the fact that dyes do not improve the safety or nutritional quality of foods, indicates that all of the currently used dyes should be removed from the food supply and replaced, if at all, by safer colorings. It is recommended that regulatory authorities require better and independent toxicity testing, exercise greater caution regarding continued approval of these dyes, and in the future approve only well-tested safe dyes. And they're talking about all the dyes that we put in our food.
It blows me away because you can follow the thread of money. And so if they actually start to, let's say red number 5 is known carcinogen. It is not good for you at all. Your body can't digest it. They've already sent reports. You read that right there. We should just remove it from the diet. Everyone listening today is probably, or watching today is like, oh yeah, that makes logical sense. Why would we ever have that? But when you follow the thread of money, for them to replace red number 5 with beet, let's just take like a beet coloring. That is derived from beets, and it gets the same property and all that type of stuff. It is 3 to 4 times the amount to actually go in and color the food that way, in more of a, I don't want to say organic, but more in a whole food way than it is to have the synthetic. And then also at some point too, the company that is making that synthetic coloring agent loses to make profit. And of course, they're never going to allow that to happen in our world today. And so until we stand up and stop buying it and start putting our foot down there, you're not going to see a change for that. We get told by media, oh, it's fine. It's not a big deal. But this is stuff that obviously is a big deal, especially when they're telling and advising individuals to remove it.
Yeah, exactly. There's something that comes up. It's a little bit gross, but I can't help it.
This is the gross show. You could be as gross as you want. Don't worry about it. Just keep it clean. Yeah.
So when I was a kid, and this is before I knew anything about raw feeding, I just knew I was an animal person, and I was amazed one time when I saw a dog's poop. And it had been fed Old Roy. You remember Old Roy?
Oh, I remember Old Roy. It's sadly,
the dog's poop was orange. And I looked at that and I thought, without really knowing what I was thinking, I was like, there's something wrong with this.
Yeah.
It'd be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And could you imagine the inside of their intestinal tract? I mean, their intestinal tract, if their poop is coming out orange, their intestinal tract is orange. Their gut microbiome has been affected. So now you've got a dog with a weakened immune system and is more susceptible to illness and disease and everything that comes to it, that animal. But this is stuff that is happening. We talk about Old Roy, and I think anybody that's watching that knows the term Old Roy. It was Walmart's brand, and it's truly awful. And so if you're feeding Old Roy, just stop. Just get something different.
All things holy and good, and your dog.
Just quit. Yeah, stop now. Especially if you're watching this show, you're like, there's got to be some other reason. So really, when you come in, but this is happening in multiple other foods that aren't Old Roy. They're still putting those dye agents in to make it look like meat, to make it look like a vegetable, to make it look like something. And for humans, they like it. As far as I know, my dog did not eat food based upon its color. I mean, it ate it based upon its smell.
Based on how slow it ran.
Right. So you take a look at the humanization of pet food. Like who they're selling is the pet parent with that pet food. They're not selling the dog, and they're not selling the dog's health. They're giving a food that has, meat, like chicken legs on the package, on the front package, and they're showing like all this food and vegetables and all this stuff that's healthy. But when you flip it over and you read that ingredient panel, it is truly disgusting. And so we were talking about this. They're allowing up to 60 to 70% of carbohydrates in pet food today. And Avco has actually lowered the requirement of protein in pet food. Now, as far as I know, my dogs are carnivores. And since they're only 0.5% away genetically from wolves, they're carnivores. I didn't see a wolf digging and planting a garden or chasing an ear of corn or doing anything like that, or growing barley and going, oh, we got barley coming up this fall. No, dogs don't do that.
Yeah.
They kill a rabbit, they eat the rabbit. They kill an elk, they eat the elk. They're carnivores. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm curious. I mean, I kind of think I know the answer, but do we know who is the I guess the financial support for APCO?
That's their board is derived from individuals from Purina and Nestle. So Nestle is the big Mars food company that drives that. But yes, they are the governing body to AVCO. That's why you look at AVCO standards. I started to walk away from AVCO standards because I don't believe it anymore. I don't believe that the source of information is coming non-biasedly. The only regulatory system that has really remained unbiased is the NRC. NRC was the one back from the 50s that originally started to set the pattern and flow of this. And so now NRC guidelines really are more acceptable, but then you can also go under the European guidelines. And I am drawing a blank on that name because I don't say it all the time.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. European has it, they have their equivalent of AVCO. And really, when you look at them, I would believe in their methodology before AVCO. But AVCO does set the standard for all pet food, and FDA believes in their regulation as well. So if a raw feeding company doesn't meet those standards, they can get shut down.
A raw feeding company doesn't meet the standards of AVCO and they've increased the percentage of carbohydrates, then they can get shut down.
Well, it's not
to. Did I not understand that?
It's as long as they meet the nutrient requirements. So if they take the food, have it tested, and it meets nutrient min level requirements, yes, they're allowed to sell it. So even though it doesn't meet, I mean, what AVCO did is they took the standard for protein and lowered it. So kibble companies had to buy less protein in the bag of dog food so they make more money because they lost 2.6 billion last year.
Oh, so, that's sad.
That's so sad, isn't it? And so I can see that you're just hurt, Nicki, like deep down hurt. So yeah, when they lowered those standards, it didn't mean that a raw feeding company, just because they had higher protein levels, they missed the mark or didn't qualify for having their pet food approved. So really, when they look at it, this is just the minimum that you can have. And so raw feeding companies, but at some point, if AVCO is setting the standards, they just still have to abide by what the law is for that. And so a lot of these big feeding companies, Mars, Purina, all of them, they're trying to figure out a way to maintain market share and try to keep their company viable. So they demonize raw feeding companies, even though they're the ones that are really having dogs live longer and are healthier.
So I think we need to be really, really clear, and I can't help but to say it again and maybe 14 more times. I've got dogs outside the door. They're mad that I have them outside.
It's cold. You should let them in. Come on.
I will still make so much noise. Anyway, but when you say AVCO, I think it really makes sense for you to say Purina and Nestle. So Purina and Nestle are telling us what we need to feed our dogs.
Yes. And they're also telling veterinarians what to feed their dogs.
Yes.
Because they only receive 7 hours of nutritional training. And even when I spoke to a conventional vet earlier this year, or not this year, but earlier last year, and they're like, yeah, we got like 7 hours of training or 8 hours of training on food, but it was for all species of animals. So now you have a dog with a very complex, I'm going to say complex, but yet simple. But it's complex when we humanize it, but it's very simple because think of the rabbit that was killed in the field. What do they eat of that rabbit? And so they know exactly what a canine should be eating and what promotes health of a canine. So when you go into that spectrum, you're really taking a look at how these large food companies are trying to protect themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So I find it also interesting. So they're trying to protect themselves, but also trying to go along with the fads. So like the grain-free diets that
Oh,
that are being pushed now,
yes.
which is interesting because I think that there's a lot of confusion around that, especially now with the study that came out, and we've talked about this. The study that came out with the it's the heart issue. What's it called?
At DCM.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
say it. It's the diet. Go ahead.
Cardiomyopathy.
Yeah, I was like my.
That's all right.
Thanks. But I wanted you to say the whole thing for
Yeah.
anybody and for me because my brain shut off. But
That's why we do really well together, Nicki. Yeah, when yours shuts off, mine turns on, and when mine turns off, yeah, you're like right in to fill in the
perfect.
space. Love it.
So what we've done now, or what has been done now, is this massive confusion on, okay, so I'm hearing dogs don't need grain. And so I've switched my food, kibble, switched it to grain-free, and then my dog has a heart condition and we can't figure out why. So then we go, so they do need grains. And that's the only component in the thinking here, is that it's just the grain or the grain-free. And I find that's a huge problem because it really, I mean, dogs don't need grains. Dogs don't need the carbohydrates, but we're instead of adding the grain carbohydrates, we're adding potatoes and peas and carrots in high amounts. You don't need high amounts of carrots. And to your point, they don't digest, even if it's like freeze dried, they don't digest it well. Mine just poop it out. And so these aren't things that they need. So we've switched them to, it's still a high carbohydrate diet, lacking obviously in the taurine, because that's part of the, or at least the main issue with the heart condition. But it's like trading one trash for another trash and not really evaluating what the problem is, and not even in the studies or in the media or anywhere really talking about what the issue is.
Right. It's just a fear tactic on that side. I mean, when you look at raw feeding, has naturally derived taurine that's bioavailable for their bodies. So when they went to that diet and they're adding taurine synthetically into the actual kibble or grain-free diets that are there right now, it's not bioavailable. So they have to add. And I know for selenium, it's 5 times the amount of selenium required in order to just meet the min level. So that's happening with taurine, is they're not getting enough from that diet. Now, when they flip back to kibble, they're, and they put them back in the fear of kibble and all that type of stuff. Do they up the level of taurines? Did they do something to that diet to raise taurine levels when they could actually do it very easily and safely by feeding a raw-based diet?
Right.
Whole meat, uncooked. You're really taking a look at feeding the dog the way, because your dog is a scavenger. And so you don't see wild dogs have heart conditions. You don't see wild dogs have DCM unless they are living in a nutrient poor environment. But yeah, if they're really wild, killing rabbits, wolves, killing elk and all that type of stuff, they don't see wolves die of DCM because they're missing that, because they're not eating enough carbohydrates in their diet. Because, like you had said, dogs lack the enzyme. Now, this is a contested point where some doctors say they do have the enzyme to break down vegetable matter and some don't. But every dog is different, like us. So they're not living in that same capacity in there. So when you're looking at all of that and the DCM levels that, dogs come through, it was, like you had said, it was like their chance to put fear into the pet owner to get off of raw, and they blamed raw for it.
Well, I think they were just blaming grain-free.
Yeah, that too.
So it's kind of both, but so people were switching just their kibble from the grain to the grain-free, and then they go, oh, I got to go back to grain, or they went to raw, and I got to go back, and so, it just, those of us who do feed raw, they're putting the fear in there. Oh, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing, because what kind of fear is that? If your fear, I mean, it's a huge fear, right? If you do anything that the the possibility of hurting your family member. And most of us, thankfully, see our animals as our family members, and we want to treat them well, and we want to love them, and we want to put clothes on them, and we want to do
right.
all of these things. And so there is this amazing fear tactic that's put out there by these big companies, and it's really heartbreaking. And again, goes back to, for me, it just pisses me off. It makes me mad. It makes me mad that they are confusing all of us, or they're trying to confuse us, and it's a lie, cheat, and steal, no matter what, at the expense of our sweet animals, who are just the best things that God created.
Filled with love.
Yeah, it's amazing. I have to tell you, I saw a video. Sorry, I can't help it.
No, that's all right.
About a dog in Argentina who they found. They brought her into the rescue, and she got sad and depressed, and just sort of shut down. It was there for 2 years and couldn't get her adopted out. Put her on social media, and they found her original dad.
Awesome.
Yeah. So he comes in. This is the coolest thing, because dogs don't always recognize us by sight.
Right.
Recognize us by smell. And so I've experienced it with my dogs. I was gone for a week. They're like, wait, and they smell you, and the tails go. And so that's what happened here. Was she was scared to death. She'd not seen any other people. Everybody had just left her. Except for the workers. And then he got close enough to smell, kept getting closer and closer, and then just went wild. And it was, I it was just before our talk, and I'm bawling, and anyway, it was amazing.
But that's it.
And it's, they are just, all they are is love, and all they are is goodness. And this is why we find it so incredibly important to do what we do, because we need for people to know what is real. And we're not, the biggest experts. We're not vets, but we know what we see. We know what we research. We know who we talk to, who are the experts, and we know what is good and what the dogs need. I mean, the data is out there on what they need, and how much carb they need. Virtually none. Except for some fiber. I mean, I give my dogs vegetables, in a ground up in a food processor, tiny vegetables, because they don't get fur, right? We've talked about this. In the wild, they would eat fur, and
and hide,
and all of those things that helps their body move. They don't get that with us, but they still need it. So we still have to play a little bit like they're in the wild, and fix their food like it should be, in order for them to live the way that they should. And we can't forget exercise, and we can't forget stress. We can't forget all of the factors that we would take into consideration if I were, or you were, working with a human client, because it all matters.
It does. And I think it's so important to have a dog that's healthy. And the reason why is, you take a look at the human client. If the human client is, or the human individual is sick, or there's something going on, or they're depressed, there's so much joy that you can receive. They've actually done studies where having a dog lowers your stress.
Yeah.
And so with all of that, if your dog is sick, guess what's going to happen? Your stress is going to increase, your worry is going to increase, your health is going to decrease. And so really in all that, feeding your dog the way it should be fed, feeding it a raw diet, feeding it the way it genetically was designed to eat, allows it to live longer, which in turn helps our health as well. Yeah. So really putting so much care and love into it. I think at some point and I love our veterinarian community. They are incredible people. They work very, very hard at everything that they do, but at some point taking a look at, what is a proper diet? Where can I get support if I do decide that I'm going to feed raw? And that comes with anxiety and worry in itself.
It does, yeah.
We talked about it when we first met, is, all those little things. What about this? Can I do this? Can I feed this? And having a discussion. And really, it's about the support you receive. And that's why I love what you do, Nicki, is you're really taking a look at it from that side of, how can I support you? How can I make sure that you have your questions answered, and you're walking down that path so you can step into raw feeding with confidence?
Right.
So when you go into your vet, if you're going to go see your conventional vet, wonderful, but you can actually be armed with enough questions to ask them. And so they don't think that you're just doing it because it's a fad.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's true. And I think that part of my job is just to jump into it with them, because once you jump in, then you figure out, okay, this isn't the worst thing in the world. It's not the hardest thing in the world. It doesn't take a bunch of time. It's actually quite easy.
It is.
And yeah. And that's just what it is. And that's what I try to tell people. Like, I'm here just to jump in with you and show you how quickly it can be done and how easily it can be done to, and it's not as cheap as buying a $20 bag of kibble, but a lot of people are out there buying really expensive bags of kibble, and it's still empty. And so, and along those same lines, I think why we work so well together, because I help them to jump in the feed and, answer a lot of questions. But when it comes to the inside of the animal, when it comes to what's going on inside, and are they deficient, or are there heavy metals that are or they're getting from somewhere for whatever reason, which are creating, symptoms and problems and diseases or whatever it might be, or just understanding, okay, this is what I need, or this is what my dog needs to truly be healthy. So whether it's general or whether it's very specific, using a lab like yours, and I don't mean a dog lab, but so for those who don't know, Matt has his Parsley Pet. It's a functional lab testing company for dogs. And I got to tell you that when I first heard about this, I was just like jumping up and down. It was,
oh God, that's awesome.
So excited. I've been waiting for this. Literally, I've been waiting for this. I'm a geek when it comes to labs. I love, labs for humans. And I'm like, why don't we have these for dogs? And there's just not the research, there's not the stuff. And we can run the labs at the vet, but I'm like, what about a full thyroid panel? Why can't I do D every day? Why can't I look at all of these other things and understand what's going on with my dog? Because if he's deficient in D, then there's a chance for cancer, right? And so there's all of these things, and you are a huge part of how we can start to learn the bio individuality of our animals and treat them as such and feed them as such. We do that for ourselves, and we're learning that we're all individuals, and that's how I treat my clients. Everybody's different. I've never done a protocol the same. But that's how dogs are. We act like one dog is the same as the next dog, is the same as the next dog and the next dog.
Not even close.
And they have different environments. They have different genetics. They have different needs. They have different anxieties and fears and biochemistry, and everything just like us is different.
Yeah. And they live in different environments. I mean, we just tested a dog that had a severe amount of mercury inside its body. And it was at the dangerous point that we ended up calling the client right away and said, okay, we're going to get you in touch with our vet to talk you through how to actually chelate, which means remove that mercury out of the system and find the source of where you were putting it in at. Because when they had excess mercury plays a role in multiple minerals and their ability to absorb. So for example, iron. So iron and mercury have this codependent relationship that when mercury is high, iron is low. And as you know, when you don't have enough iron, you're anemic. And so, mercury just it's a filler. It's whatever you're deficient in at the time. Mercury's like, oh, I got it. I can just fill in there. But we all know mercury is, causes so many neurological conditions with that. So, you're looking at all of these pieces come into it. I mean, every environment is different. Every dog eats things different. Every dog experiences, and just like us, we all have different allergies, or we have different sensitivities to different things, where I'm sensitive to gluten, where my 17-year-old is not.
Yeah, but could be at some point. I bet if we look at his genetics, we show that he might be, has the tendency to be.
Right. And especially with the terrible diet that he eats all the time, that I definitely, and it's like pulling teeth when I watch him eat it. And I was like, don't say anything. What you resist persists. And I'm like, just let it go. Yeah.
So it's interesting that this dog had high mercury. I can't help but to think back in my own practice and, seeing high mercury, which I have seen,
Mhm.
and a lot of times there's the inability to clear it. And mercury clears via hair, via urine, and
Yes.
blood. And
Mhm.
so when we look at those and we can see where the problem is, and is there a detoxification issue, right? So it could
Mhm.
be for the dog. I mean, I know for us, it could be a detoxification issue. It can just sit
Right.
there. It doesn't have a way of getting out. The body, the liver doesn't know how to get it out.
Mhm.
And so those are all of these factors. And this is just, throwing stuff out there because of my own practice and my own work. But these are things that we don't really think about or look at in dogs yet, where we could and we should,
Mhm.
if when and if we have the technology. But there's again, it's just going back to understanding who that dog is as an individual, and then of course, as you said, where in the world is he getting such high mercury content?
Yeah.
That's so interesting to me.
So, and we took a look at that. And so, when the vet and I actually had a conversation about how is this dog receiving, when we looked at the intake form, the amount of supplements, Chinese supplements specifically, that
Oh
this dog was
man.
receiving, and if they didn't know the source, really a lot of the supplements that they grow, that is naturally life, some of them are wonderful. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that they're bad, but they're actually pulling toxins out of the soil because they're coming from overseas. They're not regulated. And so really in that environment, they're pulling that mercury out of the soil because our environment is riddled with mercury. And you look at the amount of mercury that's in our oceans and in fish. So individuals that feed a high level of fish in the
Mhm.
diet, let's say it's daily, you're going to see mercury levels start to rise
Yeah.
because it's not being removed. Your body can remove it. Your dog can remove it. So something that I always, it was taught to me years ago by a functional medicine doctor is cilantro does loosen
Yeah.
mercury up
Mhm.
very, very slowly. So you have to
Yeah.
follow this regimen for 6 months, but then you have to mix it with a binding agent. So like dulce flakes, Atlantic sea kelp, and that'll bind the mercury to it, because if you don't, mercury's going to come in. I'm going to try my best to draw it. So let's say it's in my brain right here, and it's going to cycle throughout my body, and if I don't have anything to bind it to, it comes right back up and goes right back to my brain,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it can break that blood-brain barrier. And I've
Mhm.
actually read that mercury can get passed in utero.
Yeah, I would
So
imagine it could. Mercury plays a big role in Alzheimer's disease,
yep.
and that's in part due to certain genetics or certain polymorphisms. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, people who aren't able with those polymorphisms aren't able to detoxify mercury. Yeah, it can sit in
Mm-hmm.
the brain, and that can play a big role in Alzheimer's disease.
So when you look at diets high in carbohydrates, they are growing a vegetable product on
Yeah.
the planet with synthetic fertilizers. They're spraying it with glyphosate, and so it's pulling toxins out of the soil as well.
Mhm.
And so when you're feeding carbohydrates, you are introducing, even if it's a tenth of a micron that you're feeding it, but if you do that over the course of 9 years, it tends to catch up,
Yeah.
and it tends to infiltrate and get into stuff like that. So yeah, mercury, it's one of those, like you had said, it's one of those, it's sneaky and it's
Mhm.
everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. I was so glad when they got rid of the light bulbs that were full of
Yeah.
mercury. We actually had one of those explode in our house, and
Oh shit.
I'm like, who does that? That was a long time ago,
Right.
um, but it's still, as toxic as it is, and as toxic as we know it is, and
Mm-hmm.
as prevalent as it is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me crazy that anybody would do that. But
Yep.
anyway, little side point, but
So I want to thank you, Nicki.
yeah,
This show was awesome. I loved it, and I loved everything that we discussed. I think it was extremely important. So as a pet parent, take your time, do your research. You know what? Fact check Nicki and I. Just go
yeah.
start typing things in
Please,
Google.
please.
Yes.
We
And
beg you to go out and do some research. It would be
right.
amazing. Yeah.
That's how we got started, is we kept peeling the layer of the onion, and before we know it, we're like, holy shit, we got to say something. We
Yeah.
got to get out there in the world and really create an awareness of all
Yeah.
of this.
Yeah, it's
So
true. Good stuff.
I want to thank you so much, Nicki, for being with me today on the show and co-hosting with me and doing all this fun stuff. So definitely follow Nicki Burnett at Taste Life Nutrition. She has a Facebook page. You're on Twitter. And do you tweet?
Oh, some tweet, a little tweet, a little Instagram, a little LinkedIn, a little Facebook, you know.
Right. So the more you follow her on Instagram, the more she'll post really cool stuff there because she knows she has a following, on that side. But really, she's putting out incredible content all the time and really trying to educate individuals to understand how good they could feel, how healthy they can feel. At some point, I think we don't know how good we can feel. And she is your guide to get you there. So definitely follow Nicki Burnett. And also you can follow Matt Rowe at parsleypet.com. So Parsley Pet, we are on Instagram, Facebook. We're doing shows all the time. And we've decided that we are an education company and we just want to educate the masses of what's in pet food and empower them to have their loved one live with them for a long time.
Disruptors. We're disruptors.
I love being a disruptor. Yeah. I'm too bored the other way.
Yes. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Nicki. I hope you have a great evening. And thank you everyone for watching today. And we'll see you later.